The pen trembled in my wrinkled hands as I stared at the document before me. My late husband's mahogany desk, the same one where we'd signed our first business contract 40 years ago, now felt like an execution table. Just sign it, Eleanor. Sophie's voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp and impatient. My daughter-in-law sat across from me, perfectly manicured nails drumming against the leather portfolio. Her lips curled into what she probably thought was a smile. You're 73 years old. You can't possibly manage $1 million business anymore. Daniel and I will take care of everything now. I looked at my son, searching for the boy who used to climb into my lap and promise he'd take care of me forever. But Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. He sat there, spine curved, shoulders hunched, staring at his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. Mom, he finally mumbled, still not looking up. It makes sense. You know it does. You're tired. Let us handle it. Tired. Yes, I was tired. Tired of the way Sophie had slowly poisoned my son's mind over the past 5 years. Tired of being treated like a burden in the home my husband built with his own hands. Tired of the sneers, the sideways comments, the way she rolled her eyes every time I spoke at family dinners. My hand hovered over the signature line. Around me, the study held decades of memories, photographs of Richard and me at our first warehouse, certificates of achievement lining the walls, the leather chair where he'd sit every evening, reading business proposals while I brought him coffee. Today would be nice. Eleanor. Sophie checked her watch, a Cartier I recognized from our company's executive gift catalog. Some of us have actual appointments. Something inside me crumbled. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too old, too tired, too broken by Richard's death 18 months ago. The business had been our baby, yes, but without him, even walking into that office felt like drowning in grief. I picked up the pen and signed. The moment the ink touched paper, Sophie's face transformed. The fake politeness vanished, replaced by pure triumph. She snatched the document before the ink could dry, holding it up to the light like a treasure map. Finally, she breathed. Then she looked at me, and her eyes were cold. Now you can go back to what you're actually good at, babysitting and baking cookies. Leave the real work to people who know what they're doing. Daniel flinched but said nothing. Sophie stood, smoothing her designer dress. Oh, and Eleanor, we're redecorating this office next week. All this old stuff, she waved dismissively at Richard's lifetime of achievements, needs to go. We're thinking modern minimalist, very now. They left me sitting there, alone in that room full of ghosts. That night, I stood before Richard's portrait, the oil painting that hung above the fireplace in what used to be our bedroom. In the painting, he was 55, silver threading through his dark hair, those wise eyes that always seemed to see 3 steps ahead of everyone else. I touched the frame gently. I kept my promise, my love, I whispered. I didn't fight them. I didn't make our son choose between his wife and his mother. My voice cracked. Now, please, keep yours. The memories came unbidden, flooding through me like a dam had burst. 1983. A tiny apartment in Chicago, barely bigger than a closet. Richard sat at our kitchen table, a card table, really surrounded by papers, a calculator, and dreams. Eleanor, I'm going to do it, he said, eyes blazing with determination. I'm going to start my own logistics company. I know shipping, I know distribution, and I know I can do this better than Holloway. I set down the instant noodles I was cooking dinner for the 3rd night in a row, and slid into the chair across from him. Then, we're going to do it, I corrected. Not you, we, he smiled. That crooked smile that had made me fall in love with him in the first place. You'd give up your teaching job. For us, for this. I gestured at his meticulously planned business proposal. In a heartbeat. We were 28 years old, broke, and fearless. The first 5 years were brutal. We worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. Richard handled operations and sales. I managed accounts, human resources, and somehow kept us from going bankrupt. We lived on coffee and determination. I remembered our first big contract, a regional retail chain that needed reliable distribution. Richard had pitched them for months, and when they finally said yes, we danced in our tiny office, laughing and crying at the same time. We're going to make it, Ellie, he'd whispered, holding me close. I promise you, we're going to make it. And we did. Year by year, contract by contract, we built Kingston Logistics into something extraordinary. We expanded to 3 cities, then 7, then nationwide. We hired good people, treated them well, and built a reputation for integrity that money couldn't buy. Daniel was born in 1989. right in the middle of our biggest growth phase. I remembered Richard pacing the hospital waiting room, terrified he'd missed the birth because of a crucial meeting in Dallas. He counseled it, flew home, held our son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "This is what it's all for," he'd said. "Building something that matters, something we can pass down to him." We raised Daniel in that business. He grew up playing in the warehouse, attending company picnics, learning what hard work and honor meant. Richard used to say, "Son, money comes and goes, but your work, your integrity, that's forever." Daniel had been such a good boy, thoughtful, kind, until Sophie. I remembered the day he brought her home, 5 years ago. She'd been beautiful, charming, saying all the right things, but Richard had seen something I'd missed. Later that night, after she'd gone, Richard sat me down. "Ellie, I love our son, but that woman." He shook his head. "Watch her. Something's not right." "Oh honey, you're just being an overprotective father." "No." His voice was firm. "I've negotiated with hundreds of people in my life. I know when someone's looking at me and seeing dollar signs instead of a person." She counted the silverware during dinner. Ellie actually counted it. I'd laughed it off. I'd been wrong. Richard's health started declining shortly after their wedding. First, it was just fatigue. Then the diagnosis, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe 9 if we were lucky. We got 7. During those final months, Richard spent his days putting his affairs in order with an obsessive thoroughness I'd never seen before. He met with lawyers, accountants, and our business partners. He updated documents, created provisions, and talked about the future like he'd still be there to see it. "I need to protect you," he'd say when I begged him to rest instead of working. "Ellie, I need to know you'll be taken care of." "I don't care about the business," I'd sobbed one night. "I care about you." He'd pulled me close, his body already thin and weak. "The business is our legacy. It's proof that we existed, that we built something good together." And Eleanor, his eyes had been so serious. "Never let greed enter this family. If anyone betrays our values, they lose everything, everything." I didn't understand then. I thought it was just the morphine talking. 3 days before he died, Richard squeezed my hand with what little strength he had left. "Don't worry about the future, my love. I've taken care of everything, everything. Do you trust me with my life?" I'd whispered. "Then trust me now. When things get darkened, they will trust that I'm still taking care of you. Promise." "I promise." He smiled, kissed my hand, and closed his eyes. He never woke up again. After Richard's death, the world became gray. I moved through my days like a ghost, barely eating, barely sleeping. The business continued without me for a while. We had good people running it, but eventually, I had to step back in. Richard would have wanted that. That's when Sophie truly showed herself. At first it was small things, comments about my outdated business practices, suggestions that Daniel and she should have more involvement in decisions, reminders that I was getting older and should consider stepping back. Then the changes started at home. "Eleanor, we've decided to redecorate the living room," Sophie announced one Saturday morning, 6 months after Richard's death. "All this heavy, dark furniture is so depressing. We need something lighter, fresher." But Richard and I picked out that furniture exactly. "It's ancient, time to move on." She hired decorators who came in like a tornado, replacing our carefully chosen pieces with cold, modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread, not a home. My favorite reading chair, the one Richard proposed to me in, disappeared one day while I was at the office. When I asked about it, Sophie said it had been donated. Next came the kitchen. "You don't need to cook anymore, Eleanor. We have a chef coming 3 times a week. You can just rest." Rest, that code word for stay out of the way. But the cruelest part was how she used my grandchildren against me. Grandma, 7-year-old Emma would run to me when I came home. "Will you play with us?" "Of course, sweetheart Eleanor." Sophie's voice would crack like a whip. "The children have tutoring in 30 minutes. You can watch them afterward, quietly, in the playroom." I became a babysitter in my own home. Sophie would go shopping or to lunch with friends, leaving me to watch Emma and 5-year-old Jake. But the moment she returned, she'd criticize everything. "You let them have cookies before dinner. You're reading them that book. It's not on their approved reading list. Don't teach them that game. It's not educational enough." Daniel saw it all. Sometimes I'd catch him watching, pain flickering across his face. But when I'd try to talk to him alone, he'd make excuses. "Ma, Sophie's just particular about routines. She doesn't mean it that way. You're being too sensitive." My son had been stolen from me, replaced by this hollow man who repeated his wife's words like a ventriloquist's dummy. The breaking point came. 8 months after Richard's death, I overheard Sophie on the phone in the hallway, voice dripping with smugness. Of course, she'll sign it over eventually, Jennifer. The old woman's barely holding on as it is. Once the paperwork goes through, Daniel and I will finally have full control. Then, she laughed. Then we'll sell the whole thing. Kingston Logistics. Try Sophie and Daniel's millions in the bank. We're thinking about that villa in Tuscany you mentioned. My heart stopped. Sell Richard's legacy, our life's work, reduced to a vacation home. That night, I went to Richard's study, the one room Sophie hadn't touched. Yetund locked the door. I sat at his desk and cried until I had no tears left. That's when I remembered Richard had given me an envelope. Days before he died. Small, cream-colored, sealed with his personal wax stamp. Keep this somewhere safe, he'd whispered. Somewhere only you know about. And Eleanor, don't open it unless you absolutely have to. You'll know when that time comes. I'd hidden it in the false bottom of my jewelry box. The secret compartment Richard had made for me on our 20th anniversary. I hadn't thought about it in months. I found it now, hands shaking as I held it up to the light. On the front, in Richard's careful handwriting, to be opened only when you lose everything. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Some stubborn part of me still hoped things would get better. Still hoped my son would wake up and see what his wife had become. The final signing happened on a Tuesday morning, exactly 18 months after Richard's death. Sophie had scheduled it like a business meeting, 10 a.m., Richard's study, Mr. Parker, the family lawyer, present. She'd had the documents prepared weeks ago, just waiting for the right moment to strike. That morning, she'd been almost giddy. Eleanor, today's the day we make everything official. Daniel and I will take over operations, and you can finally enjoy your retirement. Doesn't that sound wonderful? It sounded like a funeral. Mr. Parker looked uncomfortable as he laid out the papers. He'd been Richard's lawyer for 20 years, had drawn up the original business incorporation. He knew what this company meant to us. Mrs. Kingston, he said carefully, I want to make sure you understand what you're signing. This transfers your ownership stake in Kingston Logistics to your son and daughter. You'll retain a minor advisory role, but you'll have no voting rights, no operational control. And no, she understands. Sophie cut in. Don't you, Eleanor? I looked at those papers and saw 40 years of my life reduced to legal jargon. Mrs. Kingston, Mr. Parker waited. I signed. Sophie practically ripped the papers from under my hand. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Parker. We'll take it from here. The lawyer gathered his things slowly, giving me one last, searching look. Then he left. Daniel finally looked at me. Mom, this is for the best. You'll see. But Sophie was already on her phone, texting someone. Her smile was radioactive. Now, Eleanor, she said sweetly, why don't you go spend time with the grandchildren? I'm sure they'd love to play with Grandma. That's what you're really good at anyway, being a grandmother. Leave the business to people who actually understand it. After they left, I sat in that study for an hour, numb. Then, I went to my room, opened the jewelry box, and took out Richard's envelope. My hands didn't shake this time as I broke the wax seal. Inside was a letter in Richard's handwriting, and a thick document with a red original stamp across the top. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened. Someone, probably Sophie, though I pray I'm wrong, has forced you to sign away your stake in our company. I know you, my love. You signed because you love our son, because you don't want to fight, because you believe in being kind, even when others aren't. But there's something you need to know. The documents you signed today are worthless. 3 months before I died, I had Mr. Parker draft a new provision to my original will. It states clearly, if you are ever coerced, pressured, or forced to sign away your ownership of Kingston Logistics, the entire estate, the business, our home, all assets immediately reverts to your sole ownership, not partial, not shared, sole. I built protections into every document, every contract, every legal structure. Sophie and Daniel can't sell, can't transfer, can't touch anything without your explicit, uncoerced consent. And the moment they tried to take it from you, they triggered a clause that removes them entirely. I knew you'd face this one day. I saw it in Sophie's eyes at their wedding, in the way she asked about our finances, in her questions about inheritance. I knew. Let the snakes show their fangs, my love. Let them think they've won, and then take back what's yours. You don't have to do anything except call Mr. Parker tomorrow morning and tell him it's time. He knows, he's known all along. He was witness to everything. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this pain, but I can give you justice. Always yours. RICHARDPS. There's a second clause. If Daniel is truly remorseful and can prove he was manipulated, you have the discretion to forgive him, but only you. Only if you believe it's real. Trust your heart. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I looked at the attached documents, the original will, the codicil, the protection clauses, all legal, all binding, all signed and notarized with multiple witnesses. Richard had known, and he'd protected me, even from beyond the grave. I pressed the letter to my heart and whispered, I always trusted you. I called Mr. Parker that night. Mrs. Kingston, he answered immediately. I've been waiting for your call. You knew, I said, all along. Your husband made me promise not to tell you, unless you opened that envelope, he said. The lawyer's voice grew thick with emotion. He said you needed to make the choice yourself, to see Sophie's true nature without anyone else's influence. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you. What happens now? I'll file the paperwork with the court, first thing tomorrow morning. By noon, the transfer document Sophie signed will be null and void. By end of business, you'll have sole ownership of everything. Sophie and Daniel will have ... nothing. And them. Given that they attempted fraud through coercion, there could be criminal charges. At minimum, they'll need to vacate the property. That house is part of the estate, which means it's yours. I took a deep breath. Do it. Mrs. Kingston, your husband also left instructions about the timing. He suggested Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. He wanted Sophie to have one night, thinking she'd won. Even in death, Richard understood psychology better than anyone I'd ever known. Wednesday at 9, I agreed. Mr. Parker, thank you for honoring his wishes. It was my privilege, ma'am. That Tuesday night, I heard Sophie on the phone again, this time not even trying to hide it. Yes, everything's signed. The old bat just handed it over. We're meeting with potential buyers next week. There's a consortium interested in the distribution contracts alone. We're talking 15 million, minimum. Daniel and I are going to be rich. Michelle, actually rich. I went to bed early and slept better than I had in 18 months. Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. exactly. The doorbell rang. Sophie answered it in her silk robe, coffee cup in hand, probably expecting a delivery. Instead, she found Mr. Parker, his assistant, and 2 police officers on the doorstep. What's going on? Her voice was sharp. Mrs. Sophie Kingston, one officer asked. Yes, we need you and Mr. Daniel Kingston to come downstairs. There's been a legal development regarding the Kingston estate. I was already in the living room, sitting in the one piece of furniture I'd managed to save from Sophie's purchase, small, antique chair that had belonged to my grandmother. Daniel stumbled down the stairs, hair disheveled. Mom, what's happening? Mr. Parker opened his briefcase, professional and cold. Mr. and Mrs. Kingston, I'm here to inform you that the ownership transfer documents you executed yesterday have been declared null and void under provisions of Richard Kingston's last will and testament. Sophie laughed. Actually laughed. That's impossible. Eleanor signed everything. We have it all documented. Yes, Mr. Parker agreed. You do. And in doing so, you triggered a protection clause established by the late Mr. Kingston, by coercing Mrs. Eleanor Kingston into signing away her ownership under false pretenses and emotional manipulation. You activated an immediate reversion of all assets to her sole ownership. The coffee cup slipped from Sophie's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, attempts to fraudulently obtain property through coercion constitute criminal activity. Mrs. Kingston has the option to press charges, though she's declined to do so at this time. Sophie's face went from white to red. This is insane. Eleanor can't do this. Daniel, tell them. But Daniel had gone completely still, staring at me. Mom, ... It's all explained here. Mr. Parker handed them both copies of the original will, the codicil, and the protection clauses. As of this morning, Mrs. Eleanor Kingston is the sole owner of Kingston Logistics, this property, and all associated assets. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. 72 hours, Sophie shrieked. This is my house. No, ma'am, it never was. Sophie turned on me, eyes wild. You manipulative old witch, you planned this, you set us up. I finally spoke, my voice steady and calm. No, Sophie, I didn't plan anything. My husband did, because he saw exactly what you are, someone who sees people as assets to be acquired and discarded. He spent his last months on earth making sure you couldn't destroy what we built together. Daniel. Sophie grabbed her husband's arm. Say something. Do something. Daniel looked at me with something that might have been remorse, or maybe just shock. Mom, I didn't know she was going to... Going to what? I asked quietly. Force your mother to sign away her life's work. Mock her in her own home. Plan to sell your father's legacy for a villa in Tuscany. His face crumbled. You heard that. I heard everything. Sophie was spiraling now, ranting about lawyers and lawsuits and how this couldn't be legal. The police officers stood patiently, waiting. Mr. Parker looked at me. Mrs. Kingston, would you like them to leave immediately, or do you want to give them time to pack? I thought about Richard, about 40 years of building something meaningful, about the values he'd tried to instill in our son. They have 72 hours, I said. That's more than fair. Sophie lunged toward me, but one of the officers stepped between us. Ma'am, you need to calm down. Daniel, I said, looking at my son directly. I don't know who you've become, but your father left a provision for you too. If you can truly prove that you were manipulated, that you're genuinely sorry, there might be a path forward. But that's entirely up to you. Mom, right now, I need you both to leave. Mr. Parker will handle the logistics. Sophie was still screaming as the officers escorted them upstairs to pack essentials. Daniel moved like a zombie, not even fighting anymore. After they left Sophie cursing, Daniel Silenti stood alone in that house for the first time in years. Really alone. It was quiet, peaceful. I walked to Richard's portrait and touched the frame. You kept your promise, I whispered. You protected me, even when I couldn't protect myself. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, business meetings, and restructuring. Mr. Parker helped me establish new management at Kingston Logistics, bringing back some of Richard's original partners who'd been pushed out during Sophie's brief reign. The company had been hemorrhaging money under her mismanagement, canceled contracts, angry clients, demoralized employees. She'd been planning to sell it because she was running it into the ground. That it took 3 months, but we turned it around. I promoted people who deserved it, fired the cronies Sophie had hired, and re-established the company values Richard and I had founded it on: integrity, reliability, and respect. The business press had a field day. Widow reclaims empire. Read one headline. Never bet against Eleanor Kingston. Read another. But the best moment came when Emma and Jake visited with their court-appointed guardian. Sophie had lost custody temporarily pending a psychological evaluation. Daniel had moved into a small apartment across town. Grandma, Emma threw herself into my arms. Mommy said we couldn't see you anymore, but the judge said we could. I held them both, breathing in their innocence. I've missed you so much. Daddy cries a lot now, Jake said. Matt. He says he was a bad son. Your daddy made mistakes, I told them gently. But people can learn from mistakes. That's what makes us human. We spent the afternoon in Richard's study, which I'd reclaimed and restored to exactly how it had been. The kids played on the floor while I worked at the desk, and for the first time since Richard died, the room felt alive again. 2 months after the confrontation, Daniel appeared at my door. He looked terrible, weight lost, dark circles under his eyes, wearing a rumpled suit I didn't recognize. Mom, he said, can we talk? I let him in. We sat in the living room, back to my furniture now, warm and lived in. I've left Sophie, he said without preamble. Filed for divorce. I'm fighting for custody of the kids. Good. He looked up, surprised. She's toxic. Daniel, she was destroying you, destroying us. I know. His voice broke. Mom, I was so stupid. She got in my head, made me believe you were the problem, that you were standing in our way. I should have seen it. Dad did. Your father was very wise. I miss him every day. Daniel wiped his eyes. And then, I almost let his memory be destroyed because I was too weak to stand up to my ex-wife. I reached over and took his hand. You weren't weak. You were manipulated. There's a difference. Can you forgive me? I thought about Richard's letter, about the provision he'd left for Daniel, about the fact that my husband, even dying, had loved his son enough to give him a second chance. I'm working on it, I said honestly. I can't forget what happened. Daniel, you stood by while she humiliated me. You let her erase your father from his own home. That hurt more than anything. I know, but I can forgive you. Eventually, if you prove to me that you've really changed, that you've learned what matters. How do I do that? By being the man your father raised you to be, by being a good father to Emma and Jake, by rebuilding your integrity, one choice at a time. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I'm in therapy, individual, and for the divorce. My therapist says I need to learn to value myself again before I can value anyone else properly. That's wise. Can I see the kids when they visit? Of course, they're your children. But Daniel, I looked at him seriously. If you ever try to manipulate me again, or use them as leverage, we're done. Permanently. Understand? Yes, I promise, Mom, I promise. He left shortly after, and I watched him walk to his car, shoulders straighter than when he'd arrived. A tiny bit of hope in his step. Maybe there was a path forward, maybe not, but at least now, it was his choice to walk it. 6 months after that terrible Tuesday, I hosted Kingston Logistics' annual Christmas party, a tradition Richard and I had started 30 years ago. The office was decorated with white lights and evergreen garlands. Employees laughed and celebrated, bonuses distributed, achievements recognized. This was what the company was supposed to be, a family of professionals who cared about their work and each other. I stood by the window, watching them, when Mr. Parker approached. Mrs. Kingston, you've done something remarkable here. Your husband would be proud. Thank you. I just tried to remember what he would have done. No, the lawyer said gently. You did what Eleanor Kingston would do. There's a difference. Richard built a successful business. You've built a meaningful one. Later, as the party wound down, I returned to the study, my study, now, and sat at the desk. On the corner was a photograph of Richard and me, taken at our 30th anniversary party. We were dancing, looking at each other like we were still 28, and planning to conquer the world. We did it, I whispered to the photo. We protected what we built, and I'm going to keep protecting it, for as long as I can. The phone rang. It was Daniel, calling to say goodnight to the kids, who were spending the weekend with me. I heard Emma and Jake's voices in the background, arguing about which Christmas movie to watch. Mom, Daniel said hesitantly, thank you for giving me another chance with them, with you. We're not all the way there yet, I reminded him, but we're trying. That's what matters. After I hung up, I pulled out Richard's letter one more time. I'd read it so often now that I had it memorized, but I still loved seeing his handwriting. Imagining him writing these words with his final strength. Let the snakes show their fangs, my love, and then take back what's yours. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then put it in the desk's top drawer, not hidden anymore, just there, a reminder of the man who'd loved me enough to protect me even after death. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the city in white. Inside, the house was warm, full of the sounds of my grandchildren's laughter drifting down from upstairs. I thought about that terrible day when I'd signed those papers, feeling like I'd lost everything. But what I'd really lost was faith in the people I loved, faith that my son knew right from wrong, faith that justice existed, faith that doing the right thing mattered. Richard hadn't given me back money or power or control. He'd given me back hope, hope that greed doesn't always win, that betrayal has consequences, that sometimes the meek really do inherit the earth, or at least they get to keep the company they built from nothing. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to the management team. Tomorrow, we'd be announcing a new initiative, the Richard Kingston Memorial Scholarship Fund, providing business education to underprivileged kids who showed promise and integrity. Money came and went, businesses rose and fell, but values, the principles Richard and I had lived by, those were forever. And I was going to make sure they outlived us both. I glanced at Richard's portrait one last time before turning off the study lights. Good night, my love, I whispered. Thank you for keeping your promise. I'll keep mine too. I'll protect what we've built, and I'll make sure it means something. In the portrait, Richard seemed to smile at me through the darkness. And for the first time in 2 years, I smiled back.